You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona. With me always are my good friend
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And we're missing our AK Mike again.
Yeah, cricket.
He's a busy beaver.
Yeah, he's busy, I guess. Well, it's summertime, and
I know he's busy out doing stuff, and he's got a lot of things going, and he's kind of changing jobs too, I think. So.
Oh yeah, first of the month.
Maybe we're not supposed to say that, but nobody on the podcast is going to tell, right?
Yeah.
It just goes out on the web. Anyway, I don't know if that's public knowledge or not, so keep that to yourself.
That's right. You didn't hear it here.
Yeah. Before we get started, how about a word from our sponsors?
"3D Aeroventures, adding fun to the RC hobby, one layer at a time."
Feeling weak and powerless? Sounds to me like you need A-Power batteries. When someone needs the best, they always choose the A-Team. A-Power batteries. Get on the web and get yours today.
And we're back to the Park Flyer Podcast. Welcome to all of our listeners. Today is a good day. Jay and I have been kind of bantering back and forth off air, and now that we're on air, before we get into our topic. What?
I said, we'll keep it clean.
Yeah, exactly. If you are listening on the Park Flyer Podcast, make sure you jump over to our YouTube channel at the Park Flyer Podcast YouTube and click on the like and subscribe button. We are trying a new software from Riverside FM. We think it's a little bit better, and we can have more guests on, so that's kind of cool. We can. Before we were limited to the amount of guests that we could have on our podcast, but now we're kind of open and we can have more than we have in the past. So that's good news. So today's topic is pretty much a hot one, especially for the two of us. It is the FAA AC Circular 9157C.
That is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It is a draft currently, but as with most drafts, when they put them together, they basically have this thing come out. The FAA produces it, and they give a comment period where you can comment, you can write in and say this is what I like or what I don't like, or this is my complaints. And they have to read them all. According to the Congress, they say that if you put one out, then it's notice of proposed rulemaking. And then with the comment period going, they have to read all those. I think with the first one that they did, they had 57 or 60,000 comments, give or take. They had to read all those.
That's
and
right.
There were a few things. Yeah, there were a few things that basically got looked at and slightly changed. But for the majority of it, it kind of stood around. But the biggest thing that got changed was that everybody was complaining that these guys were talking about getting remote ID, and remote ID doesn't exist anymore. So they came back and said something like, oh, yeah, we'll just do away with that until we do get it, and then we'll just add it back in. If you have not, I'm going to give a shout-out to Bruce Simpson. He's the Xjet on his YouTube channel. He kind of did a little bit of a video on this, and I've seen it. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. We'll give him a shout out, and I'm not taking anything away from him because all this information is public, but he had a lot of good comments, and some of the comments were funny because are not funny, but they were in line with what I already said, and I thought it was really good that he kind of picked some of those up. So I'm glad to see that he and I are both on the same page. And kudos to him for actually, looking through it. Now, having a background like I do in the professional world, I'm very familiar with AC Circulars. And AC circulars normally, let me tell you this, normally an AC circular comes out for a real aircraft because of something that happens. Let's just say...
Right. Usually it's an accident or something fails on a series of an aircraft, right?
Correct.
A door, a bolt.
Now that's different. That's an airworthiness directive.
Oh, well, true. That's true.
So the AD is if something fails and they find out that it's a common problem, right? Like the landing gear doesn't come down on 3 different airplanes. Okay, well that's something problem. Or there's a bolt that shears off. Every time, they've done studies, it looks like, this bolt comes off at the right, on every single Lycoming engine out there has a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So they just blanket it and say, okay, if you have a Lycoming engine between X, Y, and Z, then, you have to do this for airworthiness.
Worthiness, right.
AC circulars are very similar, but they're usually attached to something that maybe not be an accident, but it may be something that's common amongst all, aviators. For instance, there's an AC circular out there for stall spin awareness, right? We have had accidents for stall spin. It is a training thing. People can go out there and they say, okay, well, I can read all this about stall spin. They've got an AC circular out on endorsements. They've got AC circular out on crosswind landings, on tail wheel stuff.
Right,
so it's basically stuff that they put out and they say, okay, well, this is what we found. This is what we suggest. And this is how, this AC circular, now that it's been put out, they are suggesting that you do it this way. And, if you don't do it that way, then they can consider that as, you're not really following their direction. Now, some of these things you really can't get in trouble for, right? I mean, the stall spin accident, you can read all about it. And if you stalled and spun and hit the ground, they're just going to say, hey, you should have read this.
You should have read this, right?
Right. I mean, they can't really come after you. Unfortunately, you probably ended it all. But at the same time, if you did have a problem, now they can look at it and say, okay, well, what is it that you didn't understand about this AC circular? However, I normally am always on the safety side, and I kind of side with, a lot of the stuff because of my position of having, an airline job and this hobby, trying to make them work. But on this particular one, I'm sticking my neck out there and saying that this one here I'm not so fond of. I mean, the other one I wasn't fond of and I commented on, but this one here, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I think because when they put the circulars out, generally speaking, it's a good thing. It's for like you said, it could be for safety, it could be for awareness. And they're putting this information out for people to read and understand, right? Mm-hmm. Where they've kind of taken it and they're using it for, I'm not going to say totally nefarious things, but they're kind of warping it to use for their benefit or how they want to circumvent something or, get around something. That's what it seems to me,
Yeah, I see what you're kind of saying. I think circumventing is probably the wrong term. I mean I think setting themselves up for future additions to these rules is probably a better way to put it, right? A more PC way. If I'm circumventing something, it sounds like I'm going around the law. Well, this is, they're setting this up to be the law, or at least to be this community's, direction. So they're not really kind of going around that. They're basically just punching you right in the face with it. They're saying, hey, look, this is what we're going to agree to, right? And this is the weird part, because when they make definitions, they are very specific about who they're talking to. And in the AC circular, they talk about the audience. And a lot of this stuff is written by lawyers, and a lot of it is written in such a way that if you read it correctly, it's got multiple meanings, right? So they can come at you from multiple angles. The audience that this AC provides information to is a person or persons flying UAs without specific certification or operating authority from the Federal Aviation Administration. That in itself is basically saying that this is for everybody that doesn't have authorization, which implies that everybody should have authorization, which is true from the last one, right? But I don't understand why they're saying that this one is specific to those that don't have it, right? So what they're doing is that they're trying to break this down into professional, right? So the professional UAV flyer, someone that's got a UAS license that's doing it for compensation, they already have authorization from the FAA. They've done everything. This is to everyone else.
Everybody else,
right? Because you didn't do this specific, get your UAS license or whatever. So this is all this other stuff. Now, here's where the problem that we run into, okay? Because they're saying that this is for persons that now this addresses people who have educational purposes. So that now if you're flying, the FAA has given authority to people for educational. So all the, basically ROTC or the engineering department or, something like that. or someone that is requesting and has recognition by the FAA for a community-based organization or CBO, which in our case is the AMA, right? Because they're a CBO. Now, it could be, I fly sometimes on Tuesdays with the guys out there. We're not really a community-based organization. We're just persons seeking the establishment of a fixed recreational flying site, and that fixed site is by the city, right? So now this applies to the city. And then anyone organizing UA-only sanctioned events, which they use the term air show. Now, I don't know if I've been to too many air shows for specifically, unmanned aerial vehicles. But I have seen them at air shows, but I didn't know that, if you're going to get together and put something together to do demonstrations or whatever, they can pretty much say that you're technically needing a waiver for or some sort of authority.
We used to do them up in Alaska a lot. Mm-hmm. During our summers, we would put on an air show. We'd put an ad in the paper, let people know they can come out, join the club, see what it's all about. We'd put on demonstrations, let people fly, at the field, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So now, right, according to their definition, so we have to get special permission to do that, or what's the deal with that?
Well, I don't know. It's for this AC is set aside for persons that are organizing a UA-only sanctioned event. So if it is a sanctioned event, right?
Yeah.
And it's outside of the community-based organization, then these rules would apply to them. Now, the crazy part is that we had under AC 9157B, because this is a 9157C, 9157B, the exception for limited recreational operation of unmanned aircraft dated May 31st, 2019, is now canceled. So the one that they had before that specified that we could go out and fly and do all this other stuff and had to register airplanes, that's been canceled, and this now takes precedent over that AC. So basically, in my world, I had a book of AC circulars, and when they canceled one, it got thrown away. The new one got put in its place. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are in this AC circular, because they can be, for lack of a better term, really nebulous in my eyes. So they're basically saying, once again, that we have to register our airplanes, that we have to pay the $5, but this is one in part 1.72, actually it's 1.73. They specifically say the operation of a UAS can endanger other aircraft, people, or property when the flight conducted is in a careless or reckless manner or in a manner that creates undue hazard to persons or property. Okay, so in our particular case, if you've been listening for a while, you understand that we, at my particular, organized field, we had an incident, and that incident was for a new, guy. He went out, crashed an airplane, caused a big fire, burned thousands of acres, right? Now, the problem with that is that in the FAA's eyes, he was now operating in a careless and reckless manner.
Okay.
So now what this allows the FAA to do is be this big nebulous, right? And I'm going to go back to what happened to the air show. What's his name? Bob Hoover. Bob Hoover was in an air show. He's doing aerobatics in an Aero Commander that's specifically built to do aerobatics in an in his Aero Commander.
Right.
2 FAA examiners decided he was careless and reckless. Went back and took his license. Right? Mm-hmm. So without any input from him or the organizing event, because the organizational event at Oshkosh, which is going on, now, those guys had waivers for airspace. They had, all the proper stuff from the FAA.
They dotted their I's, crossed their T's. Yeah.
Right. 2 examiners decided that he was unsafe, and they went out and basically got, paperwork to revoke his license for unsafe operation of an aircraft. Now, if they're specifically saying that in the 1.7.3 that the operation of UAS can endanger, they're already telling us that by flying a UA airplane, some remote control airplane, we are automatically endangering everyone. If we don't do it in a manner that they're recommending. So basically, if I walked outside and I fly in front of my house, I'm endangering people and, property.
And once again, they're not giving a definition, right? So they're not saying the aircraft.
They're saying that the actual act of flying.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it could be a glider, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a turbine jet. It could be a I know it sounds like ridiculous, but I mean anything from a paper airplane to I'm assuming one of those foam gliders you get at Walmart. Mm-hmm. And chuck around. You have your kid chuck around in the street, and it bunks off of a car theoretically, because they don't give a definition. If I understand it correctly.
Well, they don't give a definition of anything other than the UA, basically unmanned vehicle.
Yeah,
an unmanned vehicle. They do give a definition of that, and that's anything that can't be controlled from the inside. That's their definition. Yeah. So anything that you're controlling via line of sight or from a remote control, that's considered a UA, and that's what they're saying. By operating that, you are now careless and reckless if you don't follow these particular rules set out in this AC circular. Now, what that does is the very next paragraph, 1.7.4, says the administrator may pursue enforcement action against a person operating a UAS under the exception, which is this exception. So they're granting us an exception to fly these things as hobbyists, because they didn't give us proper terms, and then now they've actually said we, as the administrator, can pursue enforcement action against the person operating the UAS under this exception who endangers the safety of the national airspace system, i.e., careless or reckless operations endangering persons or property, or operations that interfere or fail to give the right-of-way to any manned aircraft, airborne vehicle, or launch and reentry vehicle. So where this kind of becomes this nebulous is that they're saying that if I, as the administrator, look at you who are on private land doing your own thing, flying in your front yard, if I deem you to be careless and reckless, I can now basically pursue enforcement action against you.
Yep.
Now, here's the stupid thing. Is that enforcement action a $5 fine, or is it $10,000 and a lifetime in jail?
When has it ever been a $5 fine?
I'm asking.
No.
Being facetious, but
yeah, me too.
We're not really looking at We're We're not looking at this as okay, well, if you're being careless and not, I guarantee in the penal code is if it says you're careless and not, reckless, then it's a set fine for the city. They can say you were careless and reckless, and it's $350 plus court costs or whatever.
Sure.
The FAA is not specifying this. Nowhere in this document did I see any type of fines, which means they can set those fines based on whatever amount they're allowed to do. Now, I don't know what that amount is, but that's the crazy part about it. You're giving them the opportunity to kind of do all of that. All right. Now, this thing is probably 20 or 30 pages long, and I could actually break each one of these down. A recreational flyer, according to this, is for the purpose of this AC circular, is a recreational flyer is a person who flies the UA strictly for recreational purposes, which is us, right? We're not trying to make money at it. We're not doing anything there. Recreational flyers must adhere to all of the statutory limitations, including in 49 USC, to fly the UA without specific certification or operating authority from the FAA. So the statutory criteria include, basically recreational purpose for, like a hobby, or they can do it under, whatever the national, I think they call it the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year, basically says for higher education or research. So that's the colleges. They can do it to educational research purposes with respect of UAS by institutions of higher learning, and that includes instruction of students at the institution, academic research, activities undertaken by the institution as part of research projects, and any other academic approved by the institution. They also say that it's UAS is flown as part of established Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, which is JROTC, for educational purposes, and then educational programs that are charted by recognized CBOs, which is the community-based operations. So they're basically saying that these are it covers. I don't know why they're giving this to the educational side of it, but they're trying to say, okay, well, if you're a college student, you can go fly it. But just for you and me, if we're not part of that, we have to stick ourselves under this CBO.
Yeah, we have to be under it. Now, I don't know how that's going to work for a guy like me who right now is just flying out in the middle of a cow field.
Right.
Now I have to go and I can only be, or if I have applied to become a CBO, what's that? What is that all going to entail? So that, I don't know.
Well, and here it is under 2.2.3.1. It specifically talks to you. Using a visual observatory is necessary. So that means that you or I can't just go out and fly on our own in the park or go out and fly in my front yard, that I specifically have to have, or that this recreational flyer wants to fly, they have to have a visual observer. Now, if they want to fly FPV and they put goggles on, then they definitely have to have one. But they're basically saying, that I need to have someone that can watch for other, recreational or actual real airplanes or whatever. Now, I can tell you out in the middle of the desert, I don't see any real airplanes, and we have observers at our field that say, hey, look, there's a real airplane coming this way, everybody get down. So everybody kind of gets close. They go over a lot of the Class B airspaces and Class C, FAA low altitude notification capabilities, which I think is the most ridiculous thing. A recreational flyer should use the FAA's low altitude authorization and notification capability system to obtain authorization to fly in controlled airspace. The LAANC provides automated near real-time authorization for flight requests and in most controlled airspace. Well, they're basically saying everything is controlled except G, right, which is the ground. You have to go out in the middle of the desert. And if you don't do that, then you have to use this specific LAANC, and you have to go on the FAA website, and you have to put your information in there and say, hey, here you go, I'm flying in this specific state. Now, along with that, they use the FAA Drone Zone website, and they want you to download this thing to your phone, And then what you can do is you can look up all the sites that are approved, and then you can go fly in that site. The problem is, as soon as you open that app, my iPhone has geomapping. So now they know exactly where I'm at. And if they had to, not that Apple gives away their data, but if the U.S. government came down on them, I'm sure they would say, hey, look, we need this information. Recreational flying sites are posted on the FAA's UAS data delivery system. What exactly does that mean, data delivery system? Because that's assuming, if I read that just the way it is, it would say, oh, well, that data is coming to me, right? Because it's a delivery system. But I could say it goes the other way as well.
Right.
There's nothing in here that says it doesn't. So I don't know. Glass is half full, glass half empty kind of thing. The recreational flyer should refer to the FAA's interactive map on the UAS data delivery system to access all notifications regarding airspace restriction and prohibition. Which, once again, you're interacting with the government website to look and see where you are supposed to fly and where you're not supposed to fly. And if you're not supposed to fly there, now you're careless and reckless. They can come after you, right? The B4U Fly app, which I've said before, hey, that's a good thing. You got this app. It can kind of explain everything to you. Now it's a useful resource for the flyers to provide flying their UA in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace. It provides critical airspace information. Once again, I don't know if there's information flowing both directions, but it probably won't be too long before it does. All right. They basically said 400 feet ground level. If you're in Class G airspace, the aircraft is flown from the surface and not more than 400 feet. So even though you're way out in the desert, right, you're not supposed to fly above 400 feet.
So I can't even request going to a higher altitude then?
Well, so I'm thinking that this says that this is limiting, but it does not. Remember earlier I said that if you were applying for an air show or a waiver for that you might be able to get that type of restriction.
Let's just say I'm flying my glider. I know for a fact I can get over 400 feet without too much trouble. So if I know I'm going to be flying it, so shouldn't there be a means that I can call them up and go, hey, I'm going to be flying a glider. I'll be flying, between 800 to 1,000 feet.
Well, this is interesting that you say that because a lot of things are put into what they call AGL, which is above ground level, and MSL, which is above mean sea level, right? MSL is mean sea level. So you would think, let's just say. Let's say that you can't fly more than 400 feet. Is that AGL or is that MSL?
Well, most people would think AGL.
Well, most people would think MSL. But this is what the FAA specifically states in this, that recreational operators under 49 USC code may not be launched from a 10-story rooftop and fly an additional 400 feet. So if you're on a 10-story and you're already 200 feet in the air.
That's the way they think, right? From where I'm standing, I'm not flying over 400 feet.
Okay, but what they just said is that you cannot go to a building, right?
That's get on the roof and launch.
And then go up another 400 feet.
Right.
So let's just say that how tall is a 10-story building? Because I went to Denver, right? And I went up to Boulder, and we climbed up on top. There's a mountain up there that these guys get up on the top and they slope soar.
Yep.
Well, that mountain's not 400 feet. It's 14, not 14,000, but it's,
1,000,
it's probably 7,000 or 8,000 feet.
Right, whatever, yeah.
So are you telling me now that I can't fly off the top of the mountain another 400 feet? Or do I have to fly below me, right, from the top of the mountain? I can only go 10 feet above the mountaintop. It's not specified.
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say it's not specified. It says it may not be launched from 10-story rooftop and fly up an additional 400 feet. So they're talking of 400 feet above the ground that you're standing on, basically, is the way I interpret it. But that's the bad thing. I interpret it one way. They interpret it a totally different way. Because if I'm standing on a mountaintop and I fly out past the mountaintop, I'm no longer 400 feet from the ground below me. But if I'm flying above the mountaintop, now I'm 400 feet above the mountaintop.
Right.
So I don't.
Well, once again, most planes aren't, zipping over the top of a mountain 400 feet. I don't know. It seems comical, but on the second hand, I sure would hate to be prosecuted for doing something that would be relatively safe because, even so, another plane, like I said, an airliner would not be flying or just over 400 feet right over the top of a mountain. Bad things happen.
Well, so then they're asking you to do the test, the trust test, which we talked a little bit about last time. I actually took it. It's not that difficult. Several people are, offering it, and I think I scored 100 on it, but it was fairly easy for me. It just took probably 5 or 10 minutes. But once again, that's, you have to carry around with you this certificate that you actually took this test, right? Which is stupid because if I take an FAA exam, I don't have to carry around the results of my exam with me if I go fly an airplane. The fact that I took the exam and got the license, I have to carry my license, basically. So I don't, for me, I have a UAS license. So I got to carry both because I'm a recreational flyer on one and a professional flyer on the other. It just seems kind of ridiculous. Now, here's the other stupid part, and I've always thought about this. I mean, my aircrafts have a little number on them, and everybody's kind of, gone that way. But I love the wording of this particular part in 2.2.8 because it says the aircraft is registered and marked with its FAA assigned registration number. That's basically a tail number for an RC airplane.
Right.
Yep. And proof of registration is made available to the administrator or law enforcement. That's scary. Law enforcement, upon request, the recreational flyer may register electronically through the FAA Drone Zone website, blah, 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 or paper system. It doesn't matter, but they have to pay the $5, right, and register your airplane just like it's a real airplane. And now law enforcement can stop and ask you to see it.
Let me interrupt you. I thought that the way it worked was that you could have one. You had one number that you could put on all your aircraft. Like I have a whole bunch there. Right. So are you saying that now I have to have an individual tail number?
I think under that FAR 49 or Part 14, Part 48, whatever it is, it says that you can, I can't imagine someone like me, I got 50 freaking airplanes or more, and I have to have a different number for every airplane. I think in that particular, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can have one, and it just has to be listed on all your airplanes.
Yeah, that's what that was my understanding. But according to what you just read, that's not the case. It sounds like you have to have one for every single aircraft that you own, from my little foamy to your turbine jet.
It weighs 55 ounces or whatever, half a stick of butter. So. This is just a iteration of what we were talking about. The recreational flyer must label their UAs with the registration number for the aircraft in accordance with the requirements of 14 CFR Part 48. Now, I got to go back and look at Part 48 because if the Part 14 requirements of 14 CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations 14, it talks about tail numbers for aircraft. And aircraft that were manufactured after a certain date have to have 3 foot high or like 36 inch on the sides. So if these guys are basically telling me that I have to have a 3-inch number on the side of my airplane, instead of a 1-inch number, it's pretty ridiculous. But there are specifications, and like I said, I have to go back and read Part 48. But the labeling must be legibly displayed on an external surface of the UA and must be affixed in a manner that ensures it will remain affixed for the duration of each flight. Now, for me, I printed out a bunch of little labels that had all my information on it. I stuck it in the cockpit where you could see it through the canopy. That way it wouldn't fly off. But the way they're talking about it, they're actually requiring you to put a tail number. The way this sounds, they put a tail number on your RC airplane. Right. Now, a lot of people out there are going to be like, it's no big deal, it's no big deal. But these are liberties that they're taking for a hobby. Remember that they are asking the CBO. So they're basically telling the AMA, these are our requirements. If your guys do not follow these requirements, it's your fault, right? And now we can come after them and probably the CBO. We can take the CBO registration away from you. So
Right.
if everybody in the AMA, if we find someone in the AMA,
you're going to lose your CBO. I get
right.
it.
If we find people are flying and they're not following this, we're going to go after the flyer, but then we're also going to turn around to you and go, how come you're not enforcing this? Right. So, and if I want to remain a CBO, they're going to be like, oh, no, we are enforcing it. So they're going to come out and, tell everybody, hey, you got to do this. Here's a good one. The register a UA electronically, a recreational flyer will need an email address, credit, or debit card, and a physical address and mailing address. If the different from the registrant's physical address, they have to have a mailing address if it's different. Registration applicants must be at least 13 years of age or older. If the applicant is less than 13 years of age, a person 13 years of age or older must register the UA. So first of all, I don't know too many 13-year-old kids that actually physically have a credit card or a debit card. I don't know. They could be running around. I don't know. Maybe in today's world, I'm kind of old school. I didn't get a phone or a credit card till I was 18. So, you 13-year-olds, if you're running around with a credit card, good for you. But now I'm wondering, like little Johnny, who's 13 and his brother is 8, they can't go fly unless the older brother has registered the little brother's airplane, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just found that funny. Okay.
So wait. You just reminded me of something else. So two things are popping up in my mind that just over this basic stuff that we're talking about. Okay, so one, if I am doing model rocketry, I don't have to do any of this stuff, right? But yet I'm still launching my particular model rocket. Well,
probably greater than 400 feet.
Exactly. I can easily get up to 1,000 feet. So I don't think this stuff is applying to people who are flying model rocketry, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I don't necessarily think it's applying to those that are free flyers either. If I had a Band-Aid and I wound it up and I tossed it in the air,
right, or a football. But my other thing that makes me think here that this is kind of funny. AK Mike isn't here, but he does the parasailing, or he's the motor, the paramotors, right?
Paramotors.
He doesn't have to have a tail number on his stuff, right? In his chute, there's not a tail number on his chute.
Nope.
He flies. I'm not thinking they can fly pretty high in those things. So do they have to file a flight plan? I know very little about them in the sense, so I don't think he has to carry. I know he talks on the radio, but he's normally talking to his instructor on the ground. He's not talking to the tower, going, "Hey, I'm launching out of this parking lot. I'm going to fly over to this place over here, to this other cow field over here, and then I'm flying back." Right. Right. So why is it that we're having to do this, but that individual doesn't have to do it?
I understand.
That to me just seems like there's an inherent unfairness here. Because just like I was saying about the glider stuff, all of a sudden now I can't fly over 400 feet, but I see a paramotor guy, he's up and over 800 feet past me, waving. But I have all these requirements. But that guy our guy comes out to the field, puts up, sets up a model rocket. 2,000 feet later, he comes down, gets his model rocketry stuff, and just goes home.
Right.
This isn't making a lot of sense to me, anyway. For just the way they're doing this.
Right.
Anyway,
so let's go to Chapter 3, because the Chapter 3 is the scariest of all, and that is the Chapter 3 covers basically the organization of CBOs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but there are a couple of parts in here that I need to talk about. And the first one is that they specifically state that a CBO has these requirements, right? They have to basically, it's a membership-based association entity that meets all of the following criteria. So they have to have all of the following, basically, all these rules in order to meet the CBO. On top of that, so they have to do all that stuff first, right? Then they have to apply for CBO recognition to be put in the FAA drone zone website, as a
official
specific.
CBO, right?
Then the FAA will recognize them as a CBO, and they said specifically, if you do not follow any of these regulations, then basically you will be removed with a letter of CBO denial. Now, this is where it kind of gets crazy, because the requirements for this start getting a little muddy. Now, here's what I mean by that. An organization seeking recognition as a CBO is required to provide a set of safety guidelines for all aspects of model aviation addressing the assembly, operation of model aircraft, emphasizing safe aero modeling operations within the national airspace, and the protection and safety of individuals and property on the ground. Thus, these organizations must prepare and keep current safety guidelines setting forth an organization's procedures and policies for the safe recreational operation of UAS. The guidelines should be readily available to all CBO members and FAA personnel upon request. So basically, what the FAA what the FAA is allowing us to do is that we can create our own rules and regulations as long as they follow here, as long as they follow what the FAA has set up, right? But let's talk a little bit about what the FAA set up. A baseline for developing safety guidelines in CBO's guide should cover all the basic requirements addressed in 49 U.S.C. blah, blah, blah. Those requirements are also listed in paragraph 2 and can be satisfied by meeting the guidelines detailed in the next paragraph. A comprehensive safety guidelines may include topics that span the limitations. The FAA encourages but does not require CBOs to develop a comprehensive set of safety guidelines to enhance the safety and security operations of the national airspace. They encourage it, but they don't require it. Now, the problem with an AC circular is what I said when we first started this, right? Once this gets approved, I can cancel it with a new one.
Right.
Now, I don't have to get permission from anybody because this is a safety related, right? So now what I can do is I can come back later after everybody's agreed to this one. Now I'm going to update it and I'm going to say, okay, this AC circular is canceled. The new one is going to require this. So they can just continue to add on. If they don't like the way one thing works, they can just add on to the next one, right? So if your safety measures and procedures, which I'm telling you, the AMA, we have a whole list of safety stuff. We follow it. They do a really good job. But they're telling us basically that these are some of the recommended safety procedures. So they give the comprehensive safety guidelines should include at least the following topics. So in one sentence, they say you can set your own, right? But in the second one, that are recommended safety procedures, it must include these items. Now, that's lawyer speak for, we're recommending this, but it's the law. If you don't follow this, you didn't follow our recommendations. You can't stand up and go, well, it was recommended. No. The second paragraph, the second sentence in there says it must include the following. That's an outline, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna recognize or recommend you do this, but it must include these, right? Now, some of these things are crazy. This one says the CBO should consider addressing how they will mitigate hazards. Now, there's a big right there. We could go 15 different ways on how to mitigate. Oh, you know how to mitigate? Don't let anybody fly. Okay, mitigate hazards to avoid creating a risk to people who are not flying the aircraft, which means all the people around are in the neighborhoods. Safe practices should include restrictions on flying over people, establishing buffer areas between an aircraft's planned flight path and the people in the area, and using restricted access areas for activities such as racing. Prohibition, now this is prohibition on modifying UASs and the carriage of hazardous materials or weapons. So they should restrict their members from customizing or modifying the aircraft in such a way that creates a danger or to the public or the NAS. So what does that really mean, right? It means that this airplane was designed to fly 50 miles an hour, and I put a bigger motor on it to fly 100 miles an hour. That is now, according to the FAA, considered, in my eyes,
it's reckless, Mike.
Careless and reckless. It is.
That's un-American.
So once again, who's responsible for that? Because a lot of these kits come with whatever the recommended motor is, right? It just recommends one. You don't have to go with that recommendation. You can go with whatever you want for that motor. But now the FAA says the same thing, right? We want to recommend all this stuff, but in reality, this is what you're going to be held to. A CBO should also remind operators that federal law prohibits equipping or arming any U.S. UAS with dangerous weapons. Well, what's a dangerous weapon? I know guys that fly it with smoke on it. Is that a dangerous weapon? Or they have flares on it. I mean, we watched a $50,000 or $70,000 A-10 that had both flares and it kicks those things off.
That was really cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. But now they can consider that basically dangerous weapons because it could set a fire. Prohibition or encouraging careless or reckless behavior. So now if we fly a low pass, right? Let's just say we have low pass. Okay, well that's careless and reckless. You can't do that anymore. How many of who defines careless and reckless? That's very subjective, right? I think that's very subjective.
Well, that's because just like I was going to say, if you're flying 3D aircraft, right, and you're doing rolling circles at 20 feet high, is that careless and reckless? That has to be at 100 feet. Once again, you have a instructor or you have somebody out there and they go, oh my gosh, that's at 20 feet. That's, I'm going to go complain and talk to the CBO. And I can just imagine what kind of Karens or whatever are out there and they see something. Sure. And they're going to be like, that was so low. It could have hit my dog. It could have hit my baby. It was only 20 feet. Well, the guy was in total control, was out in the middle of the field. It was away from everybody. There was no danger. Oh, no, but I could see the plane,
Right.
There's no definition. I mean, who's the decider? Who's the cop, the policeman on all of this? Yeah, I see this. It's not gonna fare well. Right.
Well, so I know we're kind of running short on time. We only have a few minutes left, but so here's another one where they said that the pre-flight assessment and inspection checklist. They're basically saying that the CBO should provide a detailed example of a pre-flight checklist that they can adapt for their particular needs. So they're asking the AMA to come up with a pre-flight safety checklist for. Well,
they've already done that, but I mean, once again, right. we just talked about last week with Jim and I, getting out there, and because I didn't do my safety check, and caught.
So now you're careless and reckless.
Right, and I'm going to be fined for that because I crashed his plane. We didn't do any damage, but once again, if somebody saw that, hey, what was the cause of that accident? It turned out our servo was, had a servo reversed. Oh, yeah, that was careless and reckless. We're gonna have to sign you up for that. We're gonna have to ding you for that.
Okay,
that's ridiculous.
So in the few minutes we have left, I want to talk about two more things. Number one, they mentioned that procedures for night flying. So they've addressed the night flying issue. They basically are requiring. They're basically requiring the CBO members to equip their UA with lights that can be seen from 3 statute miles away.
3 statute miles away? And the things can get off the ground?
Yes, exactly. In order to fly at night, you should have lights that you can see from 3 statute miles away. And to arrange the UA lights in such a way that allows recreational flyers to determine the orientation of the aircraft. In addition, the UA lighting guidelines for flying at night in unlit or low-light areas, safety guidelines should also permit members to conduct recreational flying at night without requiring UA lighting in areas that are sufficiently illuminated. So basically, if you're in the a stadium that has all the lights, you can fly at night because you have plenty of lights. The aircraft, you should be able to maintain visual line of sight of the aircraft throughout the entire flight and identify any potential ground or airborne hazards. So we've, created this little game, this, stealth game. That is now illegal. We would no longer be able to do that. And I don't think you can see my night walrus from 3 statute miles.
Well,
Jeez,
right.
Man.
You would have to, what would you have to have on it? Since the plane's not a small, but I mean, and it's lit up pretty well. That from the heights that we're flying it at, it's brilliant. But couldn't imagine.
The one thing that I will say about the FAA is that they will never have to worry about me flying that walrus above 400 feet at night, because there's no way I could actually see those lights. Up to 400 feet, they disappear. They become just a little dot. So I like to keep it lower, right, so I can see it, and they don't ever have to worry about it. So now, all right, really quickly, this is the one that caught me the most, right? And I'm sure if you're listening to us, you need to comment on this. Go on our Facebook page, go on the YouTube channel, comment, because this one really caught my eye. It is 34361. Recommended safety standards, right? When you say recommended safety standards, that means that becomes the new standard, right? Now, once again, these are recommendations, but they must include these. And this is one, the recommended safety standards. Listen to what this says. Comprehensive safety guidelines should include a certain minimum standard for CBO members to be fit for flight prior to conducting any limited recreational operations.
What does that mean?
For example.
Thank you.
The CBO should prohibit any person from flying a UA, serving as a visual observer, or participating in the operation of UAS if the person knows or has reason to know that they have a physical, mental condition that would interfere with the safe operation of the UAS. Alcohol prescription drug use. Comprehensive safety guidelines should prohibit the recreational flyer from using alcohol or prescription drugs in a manner that would interfere with the recreational flyer's ability to operate the airplane. Also, they need to use the I am safe, which is what the FAA recommends, the inclusion of I am safe checklists for all recreational flyers. Illness, medication, stress, alcohol. Has a recreational flyer been drinking within the last 8 hours, depending on the amount of alcohol consumed, it could take up to 24 hours. So no drinking before you're flying. Do you have any psychological or emotional factors that might affect your performance? Fatigue. Has a recreational flyer received sufficient sleep and adequate rest in the past? And emotion. Is the recreational flyer emotionally upset? Now, if you meet all of those, right, that's the scary part, because you know what that leads up to?
I have no idea.
A medical. You have to have a medical to fly a UAC. Yep, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding. Think about what you're saying, right? If you're asking me to do this is I will tell you, this is right out of the pilot training handbook for real airplanes, because it's 8 hours from bottle to throttle,
right?
It's so how many times do you have guys that are out? I mean, I've seen it. Sunday afternoon, everybody's out there, pop open a beer, go fly an airplane. Totally illegal. You are now. The CBO, if they allow that, or if they sanction it, or they sell alcohol at one of these deals, totally take your CBO status away, right? So now all of that. Not that I'm drinking and flying, because I don't, but at the same time, they're asking you to be physically fit, and the CBO is now responsible to look at you as a recreational flyer and saying, "Are you fit to go fly?" Of course I am. Well, but you had a big fight with your wife last night. Well, of course, that's why I came out here and fly, because this is how I relax.
Relax, right?
Now, later on in this, we don't have time to go through everything, but later on there, they talk about the medical side of it. And I was trying to get to it really quick, but I'm having to, kind of skip a whole bunch of stuff. They talk about all kinds of stuff, that the flying site should be unique, and They talk about sanctioned events, air show stuff or whatever. But that part where it was talking about a medical or that you have to be medically fit to go fly is a precursor, right? Because once again, I said that this is the rules that they're going to go ahead and say, well, you know what? This is common sense. It's basically safe, right? I am safe. Everybody wants to be safe. If you don't agree with this, you're not safe. Safety is a part of this business, right? You have to be safe or you're going to lose fingers, toes, eyeballs, or possibly your life. That's the way the aviation world is, both realistically and, in the hobby. But the fact that they say, oh, are you safe? Now they can start changing that. So the next one that comes out, the update to this one, which could be 3 months from now, it could be 30 years from now. Who knows? Just depends on how quickly they want to get rid of this hobby. And they come to you and say, okay, basically now we're going to require a medical, right? You're already starting to require a license and a test and all this other stuff. Now they've actually put this in here as the CBO is responsible for it. And if the CBO doesn't do it, they lose their CBO status, which means the AMA, right, as big as they are, could technically, they could come to them and say, everybody in your organization has to have a medical now. And they have to go, okay, if we're going to remain a CBO, everybody has to get a medical. So in order to be an AMA member and fly at an AMA site, I now have to have a medical from a doctor that says I'm fit to go fly. Now, you may have a different opinion of that, and if you do, please jump on our website, jump on the Facebook page and let me know. I'm all ears about how you perceive this. But let me tell you what, they are overstepping, because by doing this, they're changing rules without getting permission to change rules by putting it in a safety circular.
Exactly. They're circumventing. That's why I was saying circumventing Congress.
Okay.
To me, that's what they're
circumventing the procedure.
Right. It's just the way they found a loophole. Hey, we have this circular. We could put it out. We could change the rules and it was never meant for rules per se. But they're taking this device and they schmoozed it and they're using it for something else in order to get their way without having to go through, the lengthy period that they normally have to go through and going through Congress. That's what they're doing.
Well, on the last one, we only had about 50,000 people to actually give their opinion. We should have 4 million people giving their opinion on this one, because I totally get it. I'm not trying to be unsafe. I'm not trying to be unsupportive. But when you start asking people to do exactly the same thing that the aircraft pilots that have a pilot's license do, and you're a hobby, it's not too much longer before that's totally just nobody wants to do it. Because I will tell you that my FAA medical is $200.
Right.
And I have to get it every 6 months. So that's $400 a year I'm spending on my career to get an FAA physical so I can go fly, right?
Right.
That's part of what I live with. I have to take a check ride every 6 months. I have to do all this stuff, jump through all these hoops. If you're a regular flyer just on a private, that's my professional side. If you're on a private, same thing. You have to go get a medical. You have to do what they call a biennial flight review with a flight instructor. And that's a whole different deal on that side. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're basically reaching out on both the aircraft side and the hobby side and just grabbing everything that they can to be totally controlling. And I really hope this doesn't get me in a whole lot of trouble, because I'm not looking for that, but I'm looking for people to actually reach out to their congressman, reach out to this, jump online, put your opinion in there that this is not the way to do this, right? We've been self-governing for how many years?
I think.
Yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden now we can no longer self-govern ourselves. And now we run the risk of them saying, hey, if we want this, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, we shut down your entire organization. And think about that. How many clubs out there? All I can think about is Doug, because Doug is president of his club, and he has fought tooth and nail to get where he is today. Gold member status, the whole deal, gold club status, all of that stuff with the AMA. And all it would take is for one little change not mishap, but just
Oh.
a change in the rule, right?
I
And
see.
now his whole club, right? Because the FAA could come out and say, "Oh, we want everybody to do this now. You can't fly within 5 miles of trees." Well, that pretty much shuts him down, right? Because his whole
Sure
field
does.
is surrounded by trees.
Right.
And it sounds ridiculous, and it probably is, right? Somebody could look at me and go, "That will never happen." Yeah. Well,
I thought we'd be where we're at, right? I would never thought that.
I never thought I would have to be physically fit and prove that I was physically fit to go fly an RC airplane.
Yeah.
And you know what? How many guys do we have that are out flying that are, kind of up in the years, that have to sit in a chair, or that are in a wheelchair, or that, have to have helped, or buddy box, all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking of Jim. Not that he's incapable of going and flying by himself, because he can. But, there are limitations. All it would take is for someone to look at him and go, I don't like the way he's flying around in a figure eight.
Yeah, because he's wearing a boot. He's wearing a boot on his leg since his
Correct. He can't walk very far. So
he's not physically fit. Oh my gosh, he can't fly.
Right.
That's
And it's not you and me that's saying that, because a guy can fly perfectly from sitting in a chair or standing up. I don't care either way. I'm standing there watching, as long as he's not, careless and reckless in my eyes, which he's not. But
Right.
for an FAA inspector or a law enforcement officer, which they have given them carte blanche on this, and basically stated in this rule that a law enforcement officer could watch someone like Jim fly and go, "Man, that guy's careless and reckless." Bam. Call the FAA and say, "I want this guy, prosecuted." And now we have no idea what does that mean even, right? They throw him in jail, or they can't take a license from him. They could take a test, or if you had a UAS,
He could issue him a summons. Who knew? Once again, I had said before in our last thing when we were talking about this, he could turn around and he could get fined, and a city could find. Oh, that's a revenue that we got this carte blanche from the FAA that we can go around and find people that we think are flying reckless, and we should write up a thing that, hey, if you're found flying reckless in our county, hey, that's $20, or whatever,
Right.
But anyway, hey, listen, man, we're pretty much out of time, so
Yeah, we are out of time. I apologize. I'm going to give one more shout out to Bruce. He's Xjet over on YouTube. He's got a really great review on this. He's not very happy about it either. We think kind of down the same lines. He called it something. I'm not going to take words out of his mouth, but go watch his video and you'll kind of understand how he sees it. I've read it. Some of the things that, from my professional standpoint, kind of bother me, and we need you to comment. Everybody needs to comment.
needs to comment on this one. Yeah, definitely, buddy.
I mean, everybody needs to jump on there, and there is a link for that.
Yeah, well, I'll throw other links and everything that we need for that on our video side and on our website.
Okay, perfect. Tell us what you think. Reach out to us via the parkfirepodcast@gmail.com, or go on our Facebook listeners group. If you're not joined, join up now and go to our YouTube channel. Like I said, we're trying to figure the best way to do this YouTube, because we're all three in different locations, and it's a little bit more difficult, but we think we may have found a solution, so we're still dealing with that. This is in the draft status, so before it gets permanent, we need you to reach out and give your opinion. So, for Michael here in Arizona,
And Jay here in the hills of Texas.
we'll see you in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.